Hello and welcome to Hot Issues. This week we are looking at Pan-Africanism, specifically the 8th Pan-African Congress, which is scheduled to be held in Accra in September. We are looking at the need for Africans to work together to protect their collective interest. What are the mechanisms? What roles can the peoples of Africa everywhere play in this noble enterprise? Welcome to Hot Issues. Welcome back to Hot Issues, and as I indicated earlier, we are looking at Pan-Africanism today. We are looking at issues which can bring the African people together to act together to protect their collective interest. And we are particularly privileged to have with us in the studio a gentleman whose whole life has been spent on promoting the ideals of Pan-Africanism. He is Lieutenant General, Major General Kahinda Otafiire, who is the Justice Minister of Uganda and also the chairman of the Pan-African Movement. So you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what brings you to Accra?
I came to Accra as a result of a long road we've traveled since the 7th park that was held in Kampala. As we agree that 20 years ago, we decided we should have these Pan-African Congresses every 4 years. At that time, the Libyan Arab Jamahiriya had offered to host the succeeding Congress, which would have been the 8th Pan-African Congress. But as you know, events in Libya never allowed that to take place. As fate would have it, Ghana had also applied. And initially we were interested in coming to Ghana, but because we wanted the idea of Pan-Africanism to straddle the whole of the African continent, we had decided to give an opportunity to North Africa. Now that Libya is unable to host the Congress because of the circumstances prevailing in the country, Ghana, of course, it became the obvious choice. And coincidentally, the 8th park is supposed to take place together with the commemoration of the 106th birth of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who was the father of Pan-Africanism on the continent. And that's why we are here. For us at the Secretariat of the Pan-African Movement in Kampala to join hands with the people of Ghana to organize this great event.
What is the nature of this Congress? What is the event?
You see, Pan-Africanism has had different epochs and different challenges. From the first now to the 8th. We've had challenges in struggling for the African personality and African people. There was slavery, then colonialism, then neo-colonialism, and the current situation the African people find themselves in. Different generations of Africans have had to struggle to get a place in the sun for African people. We are the cradle of mankind. We are the cradle of knowledge and civilization, and yet we happen to be at the bottom of the pile. Everybody has been walking over Africans in all respects, and yet Africa has a lot to contribute, and Africans have made history. But our history is told by other people on our behalf, from their own glasses, from their own magnifying glasses, and it's generally distorted. It's time for us Africans to rise up and tell our own story and tell it correctly. It's time for us Africans to stand up and realize that as a people we shall survive, but as these minuscule nations we call countries on the continent, we are doomed. Take for instance I was discussing with a colleague of mine, and he told me that during the Second World War, Russia was able to produce 1,000 tanks a day in order to fight its battles. Russia was able to do that. The Soviet Union was able to do that at that time, as it was, because it was able to harness its resources. Everything you need to build a tank, or even 1,000 tanks per day, is available in the African continent. The material, the energy, the brain power. What is missing is cohesion. Cohesion on the African continent to be able to maximize our capacity in production and consumption. The interlinkages. We are weighed down by these unviable nation states that comprise the Balkanized African continent. None of these countries can produce 1,000 tanks on their own. But together we could do that. Together we could become a very great power. We are emphasizing sovereignty. But sovereignty in poverty is equal to poverty of sovereignty. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. Nobody takes us serious. So that's why we have to come together, especially our generation, and before we hand over to your generation, to ensure that we realize the dreams of the political forebearers of the African continent, the likes of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Julius Nyerere, Jomo Kenyatta, and others, so that we achieve continental unity. Without continental unity, we are doomed.
So who and who are coming to Accra in September for this great meeting of minds?
Like we did at the 7th Park, we are inviting all African governments, all opposition parties in the opposition, civil society, different groups, intellectuals, artists, everybody who has something to contribute towards the welfare of the African people. We would like to bring in as many African patriots as possible in order for us to be able to collectively realize the dream of African unity.
Now, this is going to be the 8th Pan-African Congress. What has been the impact of the 7 other congresses which were held before this one?
The impact of the 7th Congress is that we have now established a permanent secretariat. 2, we managed to get the AU to cooperate with the movement, the people's movement, the Pan-African movement. 3, we managed to drag in the governments, the African governments, who hold authority on behalf of the African people, who must cause this movement towards unity and the integration of the resources of the African people in order for us to be able to achieve this dream. This is the time for calling on the African governments to tear down the borders. That's what we have achieved. Now the African governments are interested, the AU is interested, and once we move the population to push their political parties, especially the ruling political parties, to move towards greater integration, to forget the individual differences, because you cannot have a community that does not have diversity. We are fighting for unity in diversity to make sure that the inhabitants of the African continent realize the dream of the great nation that Africa is. So we are bringing all the patriots, African patriots, to Accra to sit down and chart a course for the future.
The dream was born many years ago. The AU will be 50 years now. Why has the dream not been realized? The dream of African unity.
I've told you the problem has been sovereignty in poverty, which has led to poverty of sovereignty. You know, we emphasize the colonial borders, the irrational colonial borders that were dictated without the contribution of the African people. Kwesi, had the border of Uganda been put at Aswan Dam, the northern border of Uganda been demarcated at the Aswan Dam, what would all those people between Lake Victoria and the Aswan Dam be? Ugandans.
Mm-hmm.
If the southern border of Egypt had been put in Harare, we would not be Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
If the western border of Kenya had been put at Lagos, everybody in between would be a Kenyan. These borders were drawn without the participation of our forebearers. They are irrational. They were extractive. They were influences of exploiters. And we have maintained them as they are. We have to take a conscious ideological position to tear down these borders and redraw them ideologically to make sure that these African countries coalesce their capacity in order to become great, in order to have a place in the sun among world nations. China is big. China is big not because of anything else. Its size and population and the collectivization of their resources. America, Brazil is coming up. All this, Russia, the big countries are going up. The small ones are edging away. Look at the Great Britain. Great Britain was great when it was an empire on whose surface the sun never set. Now, with the independence, lopsided as it is, with the independence of our countries, lopsided as our independence is insufficient as it is, Great Britain is giving away, France is giving away, Spain is giving away to other emerging nations. While they are emerging, where is Africa? It's time for Africa also to move in the footsteps of the great, because we have the capacity, we have the means, we have the resources.
So the regional blocks which were formed in Africa, SADC, ECOWAS and so on, were meant to be stepping stones to the unification of the African continent.
Yes, they were meant to be stepping stones to the unification of the continent, but nobody is stepping on those stones. they have remained stepping stones without travelers. Nobody is stepping on those stones to achieve continental unity. We now want to create a movement that will use those stepping stones to achieve continental unity. They have remained a pie in the sky. Yes, lofty ideas in the sky, our people remain on the ground and hungry.
Now, since the idea of holding the 8th Park was mooted, what have the preparations been so far? Which of the African states are coming on board? What work has been done?
Oh, Uganda is ready. For us, we've always been ready. We've talked to the South Africans, they're on board. Mozambicans, the East Africans are on board. We've now come to West Africa. We are going to North Africa. And, of course, Ghana is now central to the whole thing. We shall be meeting with Ghanaian authorities to ask them to invite to activate the whole continent, especially at the government level. I hope I'll have opportunity to meet with His Excellency President Mahama, so that he can talk to his colleagues, those I have not yet talked to, so that we join hands and make sure that this 8th Congress becomes a success, more triumphant than the 7th, which was held in Kampala, because the development is improvement.
So you spoke about the linkage with the birthday of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. How central is the Nkrumah figure and idea in the Pan-African movement?
He was the conscience. He was the conscience. Him and his contemporaries were the conscience of the African people during colonialism. And his rallying cry, his war cry was, there can't be independence for Ghana without independence for Africa. If we don't move, Africa will not unite. We celebrate that vision. We celebrate that vision we have failed to realize in the last 50 years since Ghana became independent. We've been marking time We've not moved a step to realize the vision of our forebearers, those great visionaries like Kwame Nkrumah. Yes, the regional blocks have been created, the AU has been created, but what next? What next? Now, unless the Pan-African movement, the people's movement, the popular will of the African people pushes the various governments to coalesce and bring African unity, we shan't achieve much in our time.
Some have argued that the African people speak different languages, and therefore this is an impediment to the unification of the continent.
How many languages do you speak in Ghana?
About 50?
More. About 50. Has that been an impediment to Ghanaian unity? No.
No.
How many languages do we speak in Uganda? About 40 or so. Has that been an impediment to the unit of Uganda? No. We have had a problem with this notion of being Anglophone, Russophone, and Francophone. These languages we speak are accidents of history. We emphasize speaking languages of foreigners and turning them into our own languages. We are Hausas, we are Banyankore, we are Swahilis, we are Arabs, we are Fulani, we are, Ashanti. We are not English, we are not French, we are not Spanish. We are not Russophone, we are not Anglophone, we are not Francophone. We only communicate in these languages because of convenience. But we emphasize these languages, we emphasize our colonial legacy to the detriment of African unity. We are Ashanti phone, we are Fulani phone, we are Swahili phone, we are Rwanda phone, we are Lingala phone, we are not Francophone or Anglophone. No. That should not be an impediment. English, French, Spanish, Arabic, these are mediums of communication. They are mediums of communication. Yeah.
Well, those are mediums of communication. How do we set out, in order to bring out the agenda of unification, especially the values that will accumulate to the African people in the economic field?
It's important that we change the mindset of the African people. It's important that we change the mindset of the African people and start looking inward at ourselves and exploiting our potential. We've got very educated people on the continent. We've got the resources on the continent. We've got the capacity. All we have to do is harness this economic potential for our benefit, other than let the wealth of Africa benefit other people. Can you imagine how much is living in the continent every day? And yet we receive crumbs in aid. We are donating, we are the donors. The resources that build Europe, North Africa, North America, and Japan, and China now, originate from Africa. They buy cocoa and bring back chocolate. They buy coffee, beans, and bring back Nescafe. They buy cotton and bring back clothes. They buy leather and bring back shoes. Do you mean we are stupid? We can't produce shoes on our own? We can't produce cocoa? We can't produce Nescafe? Can't we do it? Are we so deaf that we can't produce watches? We can't produce basic things like textile? Why don't we do it here? Why should we export 1 kilo of cotton at $3 and import back 3 shirts at $90? We are donating to Europe. We are the donors, not the recipients. Yes.
The AU has decided that the diasporan community constitutes a region of the AU. To what extent are we mobilizing people in the Caribbean, blacks in North America and elsewhere to participate in this great project?
I look at our people in the diaspora as people who have now been acclimatized to those areas. Americans may be black in America, But they are Americans. They may be black, yes, they are black people, but they are Americans. They are not Africans. People of African origin in Europe are Europeans. They are not Africans. They contribute towards the welfare of the societies in which they exist. They don't owe us a living. Their toil, their contribution, their brain power contributes to the wealth of either Europe, America, or Canada, wherever they are, or the Caribbean. They are West African, West Indians, they are Brazilians, they are Americans, they are Canadians, they are Europeans. We have to look to ourselves. We have to look at the inhabitants of the African continent in our diversity. The white people of the African continent, the Indian people of India, Africans of Indian origin on the continent, Africans of Arab origin on the continent, black Africans who have been on the continent. The inhabitants of Africa are the ones responsible for the development and projection and rising of Africa. Yes, we can solicit for support for those who are in the diaspora, but the engine of growth, the engine of profession of the African people is the inhabitants of those who have a stake on the continent. Yes, they can make a contribution, but they don't also a living. We are the engine of growth. We are the engine of propulsion of the African continent.